In the luminous corridors of Europe's fashion capital, Milan, where the rich paraded like royalty and business deals were toasted with vintage Barolo, one name echoed louder than any other: Lorenzo De Luca. He was the billionaire everyone envied, desired, or feared. With a chiseled jawline, slick raven black hair, and eyes like stormy Mediterranean waters, he was the embodiment of Italian allure and ruthless ambition. But behind the opulence of his empire and the grandeur of his lifestyle, a truth lay buried, one so closely guarded that even those closest to him would never have imagined it. By day, Lorenzo ruled an empire built on luxury, fashion houses, vineyards, jewelry brands, even a line of yachts. He was constantly on magazine covers, seated in front-row fashion shows, and hosting exclusive galas attended by royalty and supermodels. His life appeared perfectly curated, an enviable tapestry of glamour, sophistication, and apparent perfection. But every Friday evening, just after sunset, Lorenzo vanished from his high-rise glass penthouse, switched off his phone, and discarded the persona of Europe's golden billionaire. Wearing a humble tweed jacket and cap, he boarded a regional train bound for the remote alpine village of St. Valerio, a place not even paparazzi had reason to know. The train ride was long and unglamorous, often with noisy schoolchildren or elderly villagers as his companions. Here, nobody knew the name Lorenzo De Luca. They knew him only as Marco Bellini, a soft-spoken, kind-hearted volunteer who helped out at the local youth center and taught painting and violin to troubled children. There, he was simply Senior Marco, a man who repaired broken furniture, brought groceries to widows, and told bedtime stories to orphan children with soft laughter and warm eyes. It was in St. Valerio that he felt human, unjudged, unphotographed, and unchained. He would eat simple meals of bread and lentils, wash his own clothes, and spend hours talking to young teens who had given up on dreaming. One of those teens was Sofia Ricci, a shy but brilliant 13-year-old who had lost both parents in a car crash and had since been bounced around between foster homes. Lorenzo saw himself in her. Her brown eyes, too mature for her age, held the same storm of pain and resilience he had carried all his life. She was the reason he had kept returning, week after week, year after year. His only confidant in the village was an old woman named Francesca, the local baker. Years ago, when he had fled the city as a hungry, penniless boy of 17, it was Francesca who had given him bread, a warm blanket, and a job sweeping the bakery floor. He never forgot that. When he later rose to fame, he repaid her with kindness, never money. She preferred it that way. "I don't want your euros, boy," she'd say in her thick Alpine dialect. "I just want you to stay good inside." Back in Milan, Lorenzo's empire continued to thrive under his iron grip. No one questioned his disappearances. His assistants assumed he was visiting private islands or attending secret business summits. It had become part of his mystique, the billionaire who sometimes vanished. Investors found it eccentric. The media called it enigmatic. But they didn't know that during those absences, he was walking barefoot on cold wooden floors, painting walls with children's drawings, and sharing stories under starry skies with kids who had no one else. Everything changed the day Annika Weber arrived in Milan. Annika was a 29-year-old journalist from Berlin, known for her investigative tenacity and refusal to flatter the powerful. She was striking in her quiet way. Pale blonde hair tied in a no-nonsense ponytail, steel blue eyes that missed nothing, and a wardrobe that leaned more toward combat boots than designer heels. Sent by a European lifestyle magazine to write a feature on Lorenzo, she approached the task with minimal enthusiasm. She had interviewed the rich and the famous before and found them uniformly disappointing. But from the moment she met Lorenzo, she sensed something different, something off. During their scheduled interview in Milan, she noticed he deflected personal questions with practiced ease. His eyes, though charming, lacked warmth when speaking of his achievements. She watched how his assistants looked at him with fear, not admiration. There was a barrier she couldn't describe, and that intrigued her. After the interview, she began researching his background. His public records were spotless, almost too spotless. There were no school records, no photos of him as a young man, no family beyond a vague mention of a deceased mother. Digging deeper, she found minor inconsistencies in his company's travel logs and receipts, unexplained trips, small cash withdrawals, gaps in his schedule where no luxury activity could be traced. One night, after a lavish gala in Florence, Annika followed her hunch. She watched him slip into a nondescript Fiat and drive to the train station. She boarded the same train, hidden by a scarf and large sunglasses. The next day, she arrived in St. Valerio. She stayed at the village inn and wandered the cobbled streets until she found him, dressed as a common man, laughing with a group of children outside a crumbling building marked Centro Giovanni Speranza, Youth Center of Hope. She couldn't believe it. The man who owned 5 vineyards and 3 private jets was helping a child tie her shoelaces. For 3 days, she observed silently, notebook in hand, torn between shock and admiration. She saw him cook pasta with the children, play the violin in the evenings, and read bedtime stories from tattered books. When she finally approached him, he didn't run. He sighed and invited her in. That night, in the quiet of the youth center, he poured out his story. His real name, his childhood in the slums of Naples, the hunger, the shame, the mother who died scrubbing toilets so he could finish school. He told her of his teenage years spent stealing food and how he eventually taught himself finance from borrowed library books. He had taken the name Lorenzo De Luca from a gravestone, a noble-sounding name he used to build a fake aristocratic background. It worked. Investors assumed he was from old money. He never corrected them, but the guilt never left him. And when he could finally afford it, he bought the building in St. Valerio and turned it into a youth center, determined to give back the chances he never had. Annika was moved. She promised not to expose him, but she offered a different choice. "Tell your story," she said. "Not to destroy you, but to inspire. Europe worships perfection, but maybe they need to see humanity instead." Lorenzo hesitated. His board would revolt. His empire might crumble. But deep down, he knew Annika was right. Months later, her article was published across Europe. The cover photo showed him, not in a tuxedo, but in jeans and a sweater, surrounded by children, paint on his hands, eyes crinkled in laughter. The reaction was explosive. Many were shocked. Some accused him of manipulation, but most were inspired. Donations poured into youth centers across Italy. Lorenzo became a symbol, not of luxury, but of second chances. But as predicted, his board panicked. Shareholders demanded damage control. Sponsors pulled out. His name, once untouchable, became a subject of controversy. During an emergency board meeting, he was told to either renounce his double life or resign as CEO. He walked away. The media had a field day. The fall of De Luca. From billionaire to bartender. Has the golden boy gone mad? But in St. Valerio, the children cheered when he returned. Sophia hugged him and whispered, "Now you can stay for real." He bought more land, expanded the youth center, hired therapists, teachers, artists. Annika moved to the village. She helped write grants, develop programs, and started documenting stories of children whose lives had changed. In time, they fell in love, not the loud, publicized kind, but the quiet partnership built on trust and truth. Years passed. One winter, under falling snow, the De Luca Arts Academy opened its doors. Among the first students was Sophia, now 17 and accepted into London's Royal Academy. She had blossomed, confident, brilliant, and determined to return and teach someday. Standing before the academy, Lorenzo gave a short speech. No cameras, no stage, just villagers, children, and friends. I spent half my life pretending, he said. Now I live every day giving. And that, I've learned, is the only kind of wealth worth keeping. He smiled at Annika, who held his hand with pride. Far from Milan's glitter and gossip, the man once known as Europe's most eligible billionaire now lived in a two-room cottage filled with laughter, purpose, and love. He had lost a crown, but found his soul. And in a world obsessed with image, Lorenzo De Luca taught Europe that redemption was the greatest story of all.